All right. So thanks everyone for joining us this evening for the DBLAC reading series. We are so delighted to feature poet Angel C. Dye and her latest debut collection, Breath. And tonight I'm going to be in conversation with Angel. I am Khirsten Scott. I am the director and co-founder of DBLAC. This is my first time moderating a author chat since 2018. And so it is quite the honor and quite the privilege to be in conversation with Angel. Before we started the recording, I was just talking through how magnificent it feels to think about the ways that Angel was invited last year to be the graduate student moderator in conversation with poet Lauren Russell. And this year we are in conversation with Angel's debut collection. And so such a powerful moment. And I wanted to take some time to acknowledge our spring intern, Samora Curry, who's done a lot of great work for DBLAC over the semester and was looking forward to moderating this evening's chat, but was not able to. And so we'll keep her in mind as she moves through her finals. She's an undergraduate student here at the University of Pittsburgh, but we have so much to look forward to in talking with Angel. And so I'll just share briefly Angel's bio, and then we'll get into the chat. So Angel C. Dye is a poet and scholar of African-American literature from Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A graduate of Howard University, she holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Kentucky, where she was a Nikki Finney Fellow, and is currently a PhD in English student at Rutgers University. Dye has received fellowships from the Watering Hole and Furious Flower Poetry Center, and her work has appeared in About Place Journal, the Purian Journal, African Voices Magazine, Blue Mountain Review, Tahoma Literary Review, and a Gathering Together Journal, among other places. I've grown fond of Angel's work and her presence in social media spaces, so I invite you to follow her. She is a whole vibe and a space of encouragement, I would say, for other graduate students. And because DBLAC's work is so centered on thinking about community and connection and possibility through peer mentoring networks, I hope that not only this chat is a space for us to imagine connection, but other digital means of connection. And so without further ado, I'd like for us to begin this evening by inviting you, Angel, to share a couple readings of your choice from the collection. And I'm sure everyone here will be in for a treat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scott. I'm so grateful for this invitation, for this opportunity. As you mentioned, I was moderating a discussion last year, and this year we are reading and talking about my own work. So this feels very special, and I'm excited to share some pieces with you all tonight. Thank you to everyone who's joining us. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to begin with one of the poems from the collection called Dating in the Age of Buzzwords. Romance is Instagramming each other memes about trauma and taking turns having panic attacks like we pick a Netflix movie. Long distance means good morning texts with heart emojis and tulips or hydrangeas delivered to my front door. We don't party much, but when we do, we run into our rapist still trying to hashtag me to us on the dance floor after we've said stop. It's not like haha funny when I say I'm triggered by some tweet or post about growing up Black, more like light humor pressing against a dark existence. I have to laugh. Predicative text finishes my Google searches, quote, dating with depression, so I don't feel so bad for asking. I clear my browser history anyway. My love says not to worry, says kissing is always a good solution. I say I am sick of diversity, inclusion, mental health, self-care marketed towards anxious Black woman, millennial me, marginalized minority. And I love us, but I'm waiting for the day when the loving and the living is easy. As you can probably tell, that poem just deals a lot with, well, for one, the reality of like dating as a millennial in this world, in this climate, in this pandemic. It's messy and complicated, and also has its ups, its high moments, but it also can be very challenging when you are navigating life in a Black body, when you are a Black woman, when you navigate spaces where classes intersect and overlap. And I've just had my own ups and downs with that. But I leave out of those situations feeling encouraged in some ways about who I am and what I know and where I come from and who raised me. And in other ways, a little bit scared and pessimistic about what the future holds concerning love and relationships. But I'm hopeful. So we'll see what happens on that front. But so much wrapped up in that poem for me. And I should say of this collection, Breathe, that these poems were written at various different times over the last few years. Some of them are more recent, some of them are a little bit older. And when my publisher and I were compiling this collection, he encouraged me to reach back to some of the poems that, I wrote when I was just beginning my MFA or when I was coming out of undergrad, because, he encouraged me to see the progression in my own work and in my own life by doing that. And so you'll see some of those waves and vicissitudes in these poems. I'm going to read a new poem per Dr. Scott's request. This was published a few days ago in Ample Remains, which is an indie online literary journal, and it's called Theory and Praxis. In theory, everything is fine. Parents age, they ail. This is natural progression. In praxis, polyps, prayer, thorns, sands, rose, everything is fine. Nothing is wrong, nothing hurts. The therapy is working, theoretically. This is practically another lifetime, post-earth shatter, post-suicide, attempting time travel away from viral and state violence. Praxis was the groove between pelvis and thigh, grips at something transcendent in theory, sighs, but really crying, theoretically tired, actually exhausted in practice, melatonin capsule after capsule, lavender, deep breathing, and pleas for sleep for anything, dreams and theory as ontology, this study of research methods with its sample group of one. Bibliographically incomplete, unwritten, brain storming. And I'll close with the title poem from the collection, which is called Breathe. And it came from a tweet. Dr. Scott mentioned that I'm pretty present and vocal on social media, especially on Twitter, because there are a lot of conversations that I see happening there, good ones, that I like to be a part of. And so that's a space where you'll find me commenting on everything from, literature and scholarship to Real Housewives of Atlanta. All of that happens in the same space because I contain multitudes, But this poem came from a tweet that I saw from cultural critic and writer and my fellow Howard Bison, Jamila Lemieux, a few years ago. And the tweet was simply, "I breathe for Black girls," and that resonated so deeply with me. So this is Breathe. 1, I breathe for Black girls who came to the realization that they were Black girls by being told it was the wrong thing to be. Don't know whether they're deaf or insane from the screams slamming doors in the hallways of their minds, been bent and broken, who think they contortionists because all they ever do is morph. Hate harder than they heal and holler more than they exhale. Hands bloody from birthing seeds they never planted in their own gardens, and empty from only knowing to pass them along too. I breathe for Black girls whose names we gotta chant and march for to make sure they remembered. Lives snuffed out like candles, but not broadcasted for better days. Cases wide open, caskets closed, questions unanswered, and eulogies written in hashtags. 3, I breathe for Black girls who unconventional, read comics, cosplay, code web pages, color their hair to match their mood, got more books than friends, more high scores than high heels, and brains as much as beauty. Tomboys, outliers, and every meticulous mark on the spectrum. 4. I breathe for Black girls who got to fight themselves, other folks, and all the things designed to destroy them, who choose to fight for the men who are often the furrow in their brow, who stay and fight when masses and movements reject them and wrap them in misogynoir by refusing to listen, respect, and respond. 5. I breathe for Black girls who feminism ain't a one-way street, who politics is necessarily intersectional because they don't fit comfortably into boxes, whose ears tuned and eyes keen because their survival demands activism, breaths steadied by the blessings of their ancestors and the bravery of bearing witness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me try to get my view back right. All right. Thank you so much for that that beautiful reading, and in the context even of, you know, the engagement with your publisher, and the movement across your writing experience from being an undergraduate student into graduate school, like revisiting these moments in your memory and your experience, and then having new ones and figuring out where breath and breathing are interchanged. And so for those of you just joining us, thank you for connecting this evening. In the chat, I've just added poet Angel C. Dye's social media handles. We were commenting on how vibrant and such a vibe her presence is in those spaces. So please do use other digital ways to connect and follow her exciting work. And so, as I said, I'm filling in this evening for Samora Curry, an undergraduate student at the University of Pittsburgh who'd been working here, and I'm working to think about ways to kind of broaden my questions for the chat. And so I invite you all as our guests this evening to please add comments, questions, or just thoughts in the chat or using the Q&A feature on the lower half of the Zoom screen. So Angel, so this is your debut collection, which is such an amazing accomplishment, and you know, a milestone as a writer, as a Black woman, as a thinker, as someone sharing your experiences. So first of all, congratulations, and just wow, all the gratitude for your offerings. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your inspiration for this collection's development, and now, you know, how you're feeling inspired as it's moving throughout the universe.
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. I spent the months leading up to the release of this collection. I talk a lot about therapy in my poems. I spent months talking to my therapist about how nervous I was to publish these poems. And that was a genuine like anxiety because, as you know, the poems are very honest. They're very unfiltered. They're very raw. They're very personal. These are some of my most personal poems that I've ever written. They talk about some very heavy and difficult subjects at times, as much as they talk about joy and lightness. I had never, and this is a trigger warning, sexual assault. I had never, you know, openly talked about my experiences with sexual assault or violation in that way. And so to do that for the first time, like publicly in a debut chapbook, was, you know, it was hard in a lot of ways. But I also felt very safe doing that because I have a wonderful support system of friends, family, colleagues, you know, social media friends, and my publisher who is wonderful. He's here, Enzo. So I felt safe doing that. But I felt like I could do that because I've drawn so much inspiration from my favorite writers, my mentor, Dr. Shauna Morgan. She's amazing. She also has a collection with Central Square Press, Fear of Dogs and Other Animals. She has, you know, and her poems do a similar work of bearing witness, of being honest about these experiences that shape us in so many ways. The writers who I read, Lucille Clifton, Nikki Giovanni, June Jordan, Amiri Baraka, those are the poets I return to. so often, and they didn't shy away from talking about these kinds of topics. They didn't shy away from, bearing their souls, as it were. And so I didn't think I should either. And so I took all of that, courage that I garnered from those who have preceded me, and I did my best to offer something honest and real and representative of who I am as a woman, as a poet, and as somebody trying to figure it out in this world.
Yeah, that's so powerful. There was this line that you use in one of the early poems about still trying, like I'm here and I'm still trying. And it made me think about this way that you move us from lyric to prayer. And yet we can still feel you trying, not only to present the words and the experiences to us, but also to move us through the page. There were moments where I had to turn the collection this way to read, or I was reading in the usual format, or even finding myself flipping back to say, like, is this a reference to this? Or, and so I'm curious about your process. You just kind of spoke about your inspiration. What was your process like, even down to breathing? Like, did you find moments where you had to take a break, where you had to kind of think through not only the breaks in the page or the breaks in the lines, but also breaks for your soul and breaks for your body in order to breathe and to produce a collection like this?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's such a great question, because in a lot of ways, poetry to me is breathing. It's an exercise in learning how to breathe, learning how to inhale and give your body what it needs to survive, but also being able to release and let out the things that need to be released, but also that might be difficult to release. So, poetry as an art form, as a genre, for me, I think of it as an exercise in breath in a lot of ways. But yes, certainly, as these poems were coming into a formation, there were some long pauses between some of them. Some writers, teachers, professors believe that you should write every day. I've heard the phrase writers write every day. And I don't think that the sentiment of that is bad. I think if that works for you, you should absolutely practice it. But that has never been my practice. I write something every day, especially now that I am in graduate school, but I don't sit down and compose a poem every day, because part of the writing happens for me in the living. So there are long stretches of time, sometimes months, when I don't write anything that I feel is substantive in the way of poetry. Nothing that I'm ready to share, nothing that I would send out for publication. And that's okay. Like, I've had to get to a point where I'm comfortable with that, because those are not moments of just like dead silence. It's not like nothing is happening in those times. I am gathering all of this material to write on when I am not at the page or not at my desk. I am living, I am spending time with people I love, meeting new people, taking in films, taking in art, listening to music, and all of that influences the words that I ultimately put on the page. So yeah, poetry for me is a lot about taking breaks, taking pauses, breathing, right? Like taking time to absorb, but also time to put out. And there's a Bible scripture that says, to everything there is a season, a time, and a purpose under the heavens. And I believe that's true. Like, not every season is a write a book season. Not every season is a, publish in 5 different journals back to back to back season. And sometimes, in this sort of discipline of artistry and academia, that can be, you can feel like you're behind, or like you're not doing enough if you're not publishing. But what I'm starting to learn is that, like, those seasons are valuable. They are necessary. Those seasons when I am not just like actively producing work, I have as much responsibility to be learning and growing and evolving, so that when I do write, I can create something that is meaningful, at least to me. So yeah, those seasons are important too.
Absolutely. I think my 2 takeaways were that poetry and subsequently writing is in the living, and that you have a responsibility to learn and to grow. And so I'll carry that. And I think it's so central to DBLAC's mission, and even further validation of what we're actually doing in this reading series space, the sharing about process, these things that are often not visible to some people, where you see the production and you're thinking, oh, I need to do this. Angel just published a chapbook, but I was also living in those years. I was responding to years, as Zora Neale Hurston would say, that had questions. I wasn't rushing my answers. I was waiting until the season arrived.
I
And
love that
so,
quote. I do.
yeah.
There are years that ask questions and years that answer.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so as I sat with the collection, I thought about breath and breathing, and the act to breathe, or to have breath. And I thought about Terry McMillan, Waiting to Exhale. I thought about Ashawn Crawley's Pentecostal breath. I thought about the biblical instruction of let everything that has breath. I thought of Eric Garner 11 times repeating, I can't breathe. Mm-hmm. I thought of Damaris Hill, breath better spent. And I thought of Benny Simmons, a DBLAC member, who shared with me during a writing retreat, during a breathing meditation, how transformative of an experience it was that people, Black people, collectively cared about her breath, her breathing. And so together, these connections prompted me to ask you what you'd hope readers experienced and or encountered through your collection, through the stories that you shared in your poetry.
Yeah, two things. First, I just want to thank you for the way that you crafted that question, because that's such a Black feminist citational practice you just did right there. I love that. You named so many people and texts and things that have so much meaning to me and have influenced me in so many ways. But the one thing that I hope people get from this collection is some level of liberation, encouragement, peace about whatever obstacles they are facing, whatever struggles they have encountered, right? The reason that I write about these difficult subjects, there are so many things in this collection. I was reading it again in preparation for this reading tonight, and these poems transport me because they are memories. Like one of the poems, the Geigen for Disconnect, in there is about an experience of eviction that I went through with my mother when I was 11 years old. And it's such a vivid memory for me. And if that's not something you've experienced, I try and sort of put you in that space with me so you can feel what that might have been like. But many people know that experience. If not at that level, they know some level of what it's like to not have the resources that you need, or to worry about if you're going to be able to make ends meet, or take care of the financial responsibilities that you have, take care of your family. And so my hope in being truthful about and transparent about those experiences in my own life is that, people feel safe enough after reading this to talk about those experiences, to ask for help if they need it, to say to someone, I went through that too, or this is what I went through. I want you to know you're not alone in that experience. That's a lot of what poetry is for me, is just relating, connecting. I keep going back to the Bible. I don't know why that's happening tonight, but there's a passage of scripture that says we overcome by the words of our testimony. And so I think we have a real responsibility as citizens of the world to bear witness, to testify, right? We don't go through situations so that we can, learn from them and just be better for ourselves. I think of all things in terms of community. So my having to experience, eviction, or having experienced, physical violation, any of those things, those experiences are not unique to me, but they're also not just things I'm supposed to bottle up and hold on to and never talk about and never share. Because the way that I came out of them might help somebody else to get out of a similar situation or something else. So that's part of why it's so important to me to just be real, just keep it 100 in the poems. I have nothing to hide, in the times where I have kept very difficult experiences like secret for long periods of time, I felt it in my body. Like it hurt me physically, as well as mentally and emotionally. So my aim as a poet is to release some of that, right? To just allow myself to be who I am, with all of the like ugliness and scars that comes along with.
Yeah. You know, what's so powerful to me as I read this collection, and I mean, it's a short collection, but there were so many ways, as you said, that we were transported and moved and held, like this demand to be held, to stay in this moment, or even turn, you know, like our orientation to what was being shared, that breathing is assumed to be so universal, right? This idea of breath, and life and living. But there's so much vulnerability in that exhale and that testimony and that release and that sharing, that, you know, to put universality and vulnerability in conversation together is a powerful, powerful experience. And so this is yet another moment of gratitude and thanks, for the invitation and for the space that we can collectively share by way of your collection. And so I just want to remind everyone who's joined us to feel free to engage in the chat, feel free to use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. And DBLAC has graciously supported Angel even further by purchasing 20 copies of this debut collection. And if you're interested in receiving a copy by way of attendance here, please do type in the chat, "I'm interested," or send us a personal email, and we'll get those mailed out at the end of term here, when we have a little bit more flexibility in our capacity. So thanks everyone again for joining us. So we'll continue with a couple more questions.
Thank you so much for that. Let me just say thank you.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know how to like fully put into words like what that means to me. It's one thing to say to a writer, to an artist, like, I support your work, I love what you're doing. It's another thing to purchase their work and make sure that other people get it in their hands. Like, that means so much to me. So thank you so very much. And to everyone who will get a copy of the book, I hope that you connect with me on, on social media, on Facebook, wherever you find me. And if we run into each other in person, I would love to like sign the book for you, leave a little note in there. Thank you for reading my poems and sitting with my work. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you read the poem titled after the collection, Breath, and you open by saying that you breathe for Black girls. And I want to talk about this a little bit more. I mean, I could make a lot of assumptions about a line and gendered experience, but why Black girls? Why now? Why breathing? Why this focus?
Yeah. So for one, Black girlhood is so much a part of who I am. Like, I am no longer a girl in age, but Black girlhood is still very much a part of who I am. I don't know how to say it better than that. But I also just feel so protective of Black girls, of Black women. I feel solidarity with Black girls and Black women. I mean, like, I don't know how to explain that for real, except that, as when I was a Black girl, when I was a little girl, as you can see from the poems, like, there were moments when I needed protection. There were moments when I needed safety, when I needed care and concern. And I don't want to imply that like that was never there. It was there. But even when it's there, there are people who would seek to do us harm. And so my goal, like in life, is to always make myself a safe place for Black girls, for Black women, regardless of how they, identify and gender. Like, if you identify with anything in these poems are for you, right? If you see yourself in any of these poems are yours. So yeah, like, Black girlhood is so important to me because I think that, in our culture in the United States, but also globally in the media, we are not protected. We are not praised. We are not celebrated in the ways that we should be. And so I'm going to do that every chance I get. Like, nothing makes me happier than seeing little Black girls like out in public and being like, your hair is so cute, you know, because we don't get that enough. Like, we don't get that kind of care enough. And I think we need that. We should have that. Why wouldn't we be told that we're beautiful, that we're valuable, that we are loved, that we are cared for, that what concerns us concerns other people? And I mentioned Black feminism, you know, earlier, but that's not just a set of like scholarly practices for me. That's a lifestyle, right? Like Alice Walker's definition of womanism, you know, someone who loves the folk, who loves women. That's the kind of life I'm trying to live, right? Like, that's not just, you know, in my scholarship, in my research, citing other Black women, but that's like, I cultivate real relationships with Black women because they matter to me, because their well-being is my well-being. If they are not good, I'm not good. Yeah. I mean, this is bringing up so many things for me. Like Kambahi said that, you know, if Black women were free, it would mean that we would all have to be free, because like our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression, right? So we got to start there, is what I read them saying, right? That it has to begin there. If we take care of Black women, then doors and things will open up for everybody else too.
Absolutely. You know, I think that's why, you know, the simplicity of the collection's title, Breathe, as both a provocation, an invitation, an affirmation of what it means to protect Black girls, to protect Black women, to invite them to breathe, to take those moments to know that you're not alone in that breathing is just profound. You know, it's this moment that, again, is so universal and for some so accessible, but really requires a vulnerability, a looking at, a naming, of then saying, if I do this for you, then all these other things will be made possible. So beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just want to say one more thing on that tip, because you know, in relation to the title, you just said it, right? Like, it's a provocation, it's an affirmation, it's all of those, an invitation, all of those things. And really, like, when I think about the word breathe, that it's like fundamental, like, level of meaning, you know, I had to ask myself, how often do I just like rest and allow myself to breathe and feel my breath, feel myself in my body, plant my feet on the ground, feel myself present in the moment. And in my day-to-day life with like school responsibilities, you know, that doesn't happen enough. And so I hope that this collection is an opportunity for you, even if you take, you know, 15, 20 minutes, sit with it, read the poems, that you breathe a little bit while you do that, you know, that you rest, that you allow yourself to be present in the moment.
Yeah, that presentism is so important. Like, it makes me think back to what you were saying earlier about how we show up, you know, this kind of hustle, grind cultures. I'm thinking here about like the NAP ministry and how I have to like find that account every day just to remind myself before the world snatch me, before my calendar snatches me up and all the notifications, that like, you deserve this, like you must demand this. And then even how I begin to restructure my community, who's sending text to remind me to rest, or like, how are you feeling today, what's going on, not did you get this done, when are we meeting about this, you know, that flexibility, that responsivity, that responsibility. And it's so very important, just so very important.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shift a little bit, and this is a network, a DBLAC network type question, especially because in the past couple months, I've been working with the HBCU community very intently. I committed myself to being a visiting assistant professor at my alma mater, Tougaloo College in Mississippi. And so I've been teaching this course. And as a result, just like paying attention to other HBCUs more intimately, specifically their English departments. And I was writing a piece about the legacies of poets at HBCUs, like usually poets in residence, Alice Walker, Audre Lorde, just countless folks at different campuses over time. And I started to see this shift in the presence of creative writing programs, especially at your smaller private HBCUs. They're, not being funded as well. The faculty isn't there. And so just kind of thinking about that loss and that energy that so many students are longing for. And so in the vein of DBLAC being a network centered on communal approaches to writing support, and even supporting those who are imagining possibilities for their writing, I want to focus a question on your journey as a student, a poet, a thinker, a writer. And so from your bio, of course, as I shared at the beginning, we learned that you graduated from Howard. You earned an MFA in creative writing from the University of Kentucky, and that you're currently a PhD student at Rutgers. And so additionally, you've received fellowships from the Watering Hole and Furious Flower. And so, of course, cheers to you. These are beautiful accomplishments that deserve to be celebrated. And so our audience considered the broader network of DBLAC and any aspiring writers who might be listening. If you could just give some insight about how each of these spaces or any of these spaces assisted your development as a writer, as a scholar, and as a poet, and even how they connected to the development of even this collection. How did you get here through those spaces, through mentorship, through training, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I would not be where I am right now as a scholar or as a person without all of those spaces. So my time at Howard was like the best time of my life. And everybody in my life knows that. I'm still very proud of my HBCU experience, even though like for me, there was a lot of struggle throughout those years. I did 5 years in undergrad instead of 4, paying my own way through school. It was difficult, right? But academically, socially, oh my gosh, like nothing compares to that for me. It was so amazing. And that is where I met my mentor, who is still my mentor and is like family to me, Dr. Shauna Morgan. She was my English professor my second semester at Howard. And of course, part of the reason I went to Howard is I knew their legacy of churning out amazing Black writers, right? Like the legacy far preceded me. Zora Neale Hurston and, Lucille Clifton and Toni Morrison. Like, I was like, those are like impossible shoes to fill. I'm not going there to do that. But I did hope that, I would come out of there with a clearer sense of what my career trajectory would look like. Mm-hmm. And what to do with my love for reading and writing. So I did. I definitely came out with that. I mean, there were so many moments at Howard where I was encouraged to read my writing publicly, to like share it, to send it for publication, things I'd never even like thought about before going there. So my training, cultivation as a writer really began there in workshop classes, creative writing classes, English classes. And towards the end of my time there, I was considering doing a PhD in English, but not ready to go right into a very research intensive program. And so Dr. Morgan encouraged me to consider doing an MFA. She was like, you have some very amazing gifts with writing, and you just need to decide like if that's a hobby for you or if that's something you're trying to make a career out of. Mm-hmm. And no one in my family is a professional writer or artist, so I was like, I didn't even know you could make a career out of writing poems. And she connected me with the wonderful Frank X. Walker at the University of Kentucky, formerly the Poet Laureate of Kentucky. And he just pulled me right on over there to Kentucky, which is not a place I ever thought I would live or go to for any reason. But the creative writing community in Lexington and Kentucky broadly is very strong. It's beautiful. It's thriving. And so I was just kind of loved right into that space like I had been at Howard. And I spent 2 years there working on a thesis collection of poetry, doing open mics, all that kind of stuff. And I loved it. I was so happy. And I came out of there feeling like, yeah, I can firmly call myself a writer, a poet now. Like this is a part of who I am. This is something I see myself doing long term. This is something I see myself teaching because I began teaching in Kentucky. And so I was like, all right, let's go to school again. And I applied for doctoral programs, and Rutgers, was an obvious choice for me. The faculty at Rutgers is just like amazing. And Evie Shockley is there at Rutgers, New Brunswick, and she has always been a sort of literary icon to me. I had read her work as an undergraduate. I had worked with her in The Watering Hole, a writing retreat I did in 2016. And her career trajectory was also just very similar to what I could picture for myself. She's a professional poet and also a professor of English, of literature. And I was like, well, I mean, those are both the things that I'm, learning how to do. So maybe that's the place for me. And it ended up being the right choice for so many reasons. But I said all that to say, like, I needed to go through all of those different spaces, not just the academic spaces, because the Watering Hole is not university affiliated. That's, a space that I found out from being in community with other poets, and going to like retreats and stuff. I connected with the Watering Hole because of Furious Flower, which is housed at James Madison University. And they're doing amazing work at Furious Flower. And so those connections sort of came very organically, just from allowing myself to write and go to events where other writers were present. And those experiences and relationships have sustained me up until this point. Like they're invaluable to me. Those are the spaces I turn to for, support and encouragement, and also critique. Like they challenge me. They challenge me in my writing. They challenge me as a scholar, as a person. And that's family too. And writing is not for me, an individual act. It's not something that I think you can do well in isolation. That's my belief, right? It hasn't been that way for me. I have needed community at every turn to write, to create, to think. And so all of my artistic and academic experiences have been communal. And yeah, if I could give advice to any, aspiring writers, emerging writers, it would be that, like, connect with people who are doing the work that you see yourself doing. Connect with people who have a shared, vision about why they need to create, why they need to write. And that doesn't always mean, people who are publishing or who are winning push carts, right? Like that's great. If you connect with those people, but that stuff can also come in time, like that can come later. But for now, it's important to have people who will give you honest feedback on your work. It's important to have people who have positive worldviews, who are progressive in their politics, right? Like those things we don't often talk about them, but that matters too. How are you going to be a poet of the people and, your worldviews are skewed, they're messed up. So I'm around people who challenge me on my worldviews all the time, who challenge me on my beliefs, who push me to be a more open and honest and learned person by just being themselves. So yeah.
Awesome. Beautiful, beautiful. I can totally agree to the testament of community, and hope that we are now also a part of your community, and a community that shares other communities. So those of you who are listening or will listen to the recording in the future, these spaces, these programs, the retreat spaces, even DBLAC are infinite possibilities for connection with other writers and other possibilities to imagine and dream of new worlds. And so just as a reminder, as we kind of come towards the end of the questions questions that we've prepared. If you have any questions or comments or moments that you'd like to share here with Angel in dialogue, please do use the Q&A or the chat, and we'll happily move these moments. So Kelsey has just offered, how important is artistic or personal lineage to your work?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. Personal lineage informs like everything that I write. There's a poem in this collection called The Women in My Words. And that poem is all about like lineage. And I mean like my direct lineage, my mother, her sisters, my dad's sisters, my grandmothers. It's about the women who I know, who I watched growing up and observed how they took care of house and home and how they took care of children, how they took care of their spouses, how they took care of themselves or how they did not, right? And all of that shows up in my work. So every time, you know, you read a poem by Angel, just know like you're reading the voices of so many other people, not just me, but all the people who have, you know, made me possible. But artistic lineage is also important to me. Some of you came on later, but Dr. Scott and I were talking about my love, my deep like adoration for Janelle Monáe. Like if you know me, you know that. Like it's been that way for so long, but she is someone who inspires me, not just because of her music, but because of her approach to her art. And often I see in her work, you know, attempts to celebrate the most marginalized people among us, to celebrate those who don't often get the sort of platform that she now has. And that's something I aim to do as well as I, you know, move through my life and career. Who knows like what spaces I will be in, but I hope that always when I'm in those spaces, I'm not showing up just as me. So she's one of my faves. I mentioned some writers earlier, June Jordan, Lucille Clifton, Amiri Baraka, Sterling Brown. Like that's my artistic lineage. Not that I'm saying I'm on their level, right? But that, you know, I aim to do some of what I see them doing in their work, which is writing about authentic experiences of Black life in the United States and elsewhere, writing truthfully about systems of power and how they affect me and others, writing honestly about family, and all of that, right? Like that, all of that is part of my artistic and personal lineage. And that is extremely important to me, not just as a writer, but as a person, that I think of myself as being connected to those who have gone before me, but also those who are right alongside me.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you. So Luana asked a question about, could you please talk a little bit about the cover of the book, the choice of colors, the message it conveys? And so I'll share here on the screen.
Yeah, I'm smiling because Enzo is here, my publisher, and he is the artist behind this beautiful cover of Breathe. You know, we talked a little bit about what kind of cover we thought would capture some of what the poems are about. And he sent me this image after a few weeks of kind of going back and forth. And I was like, that's it. That's the one, because the vapors there in the image like have so many different sort of like resonances for me. I mean, obviously inhaling and exhaling is a biological process of like taking in oxygen and carbon dioxide and exhaling and all of that. So there's a sort of like scientific thing there, but also I think of the vapors as somehow representing like some of the smog and like thick air that we breathe that can be very difficult for us to breathe through. There are a lot of images in the poems of, you know, air and breath, and some images of like water. All of that shows up for me in this cover art. And also the colors. I mean, purple is my favorite color, always has been. I don't know if Enzo knew that when he designed the cover, but I was like, I mean, you captured it. Like you got it right, hit the nail on the head. But also like those dark colors for me are so beautiful and so rich because they remind me of like the different shades and hues that, you know, Black people come in, and they're all just so beautiful and rich and vibrant. And so I love this cover art. I mean, I cannot take credit for it, but I absolutely love it.
Awesome. You know what's interesting, when I looked at the cover, have you seen a flame when it's moving? I'm specifically thinking about like if you have a gas stove, or you're using like
Mhm.
the like if you're catering and there's like a shape
Yes.
like and I think about like when there's something added to it, like a cinder or some outside element, how it starts to move. And I actually got a vibe of like heat and flame and movement.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the beauty of covers. I do judge books by their covers. I know, I know there's an adage that says that we shouldn't,
That's so
but covers
funny.
matter.
They
They are
do.
such an invitation and a space for interpretation and possibility. And so it's always a privilege and honor to both hear from an author and then to have the presence of a publisher who has influenced the cover art. So thank you for joining us, Enzo. So as we conclude, the infamous question, I guess, are you working on anything? You did share theory and praxis with us. I just had to throw that in there. You shared on your Instagram story the other day, and I screenshotted it. I was like, girl, you could just go to the internet and read it, but I had to. I was just it just grabbed me. I mean, I wasn't holding my finger down long enough, and I was like, let me just screenshot this.
Yeah.
But it was so beautiful the way that you kind of, play with space and breath and time, and possibility, and even this kind of, I think, binary, especially in academic spaces, that theory requires praxis or praxis should be theory. And I'm just like, when you really think of it, it's just the living, as you said, it's the living. And then there are these perceptions. And so are you working on anything? Are you at any kind of milestones in your graduate career? Just things that we could be thinking of you during this time or supporting you with as you continue?
Yes. Well, first, just thank you for those words of encouragement about theory and praxis. I worked on that poem for a long time. I wrestled with it for a long time, and I was really grateful that Ample Remains published it. Yes, I've been writing. I am gathering some poems that I think are becoming what might be, my first full-length collection of poetry. Here's hoping, right? I don't have any sort of like, deadline or publication date for that. They're still coming into form. But that's partly because I am at a big milestone in my graduate career, which is that I will be taking my qualifying exams in T minus like a few days, literally like 2 weeks. I'm taking qualifying exams for my English PhD program. And as you know, like that is it's crunch time. Like it's a very challenging time. I've spent about 8 months reading and reading and reading, note taking, learning, and now it's time to show what I know. But after I pass qualifying exams, I will be a PhD candidate.
Yeah.
And I will be all but dissertation soon. I will be writing my dissertation proposal this summer. So yeah, those are the things that I'm working on most right now. And also the living. We keep talking about the living, but after I finish exams, like my main goal for this year was to pass those exams and then like live my best life, like rest, like deeply rest, recuperate my mind, my body, reconnect with my family and my friends who I haven't like been able to see and hang out with as much while I'm studying, travel, and like just enjoy myself. I was born in the summer, so summer is always my favorite time of year. So I'm looking forward to the next few months of just like recharging after passing this huge exam.
Awesome.
Thank you for the well wishes in the chat. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, I should say, thanks for spending your time with us while you're studying for exams. That is no small feat or offering. And so we are so appreciative at DBLAC but also, that is what you're working on. I think sometimes we're looking to craft the answer to that, but you are working on your exams, and so you can get to the summer, and that is more than enough. And so we will be thinking of you and hyping you up online when you take your exams. And your DBLAC community and the digital community all around is here for you. We support you, we love you, we love all that you're doing. And so I want to invite everyone again to connect with Angel on social media. Catch the vibe. It's always something happening. And please also follow DBLAC. In 2 weeks, we will be hosting Dr. Moya Bailey and Dr. Raven Stringfield for Massage Noir Transformed on May 2nd. Really excited about this one as well. This has been an outstanding semester for DBLAC's reading series. So please do go to our website or our social media to get the registration link for that space. You don't want to miss that one. Thank you again, Angel, for sharing your time with us and your collection with the world. And those of you who express interest, we'll make sure that these get out to you at the end of term when we do our mailing. And please stay safe, everyone. And we look forward to connecting again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.